Have you ever asked yourself, what exactly does the VA need when it rates my claim? If you've asked this question or thought about it, this video is for you. In this video, we're going to discuss what the VA actually needs and how they grant a claim. We're going to talk about evidence, what's good evidence, what's bad evidence, current symptoms, how to get them. We're going to talk about a Nexus, one of the key things that you need to tie your condition into your military service. And we're going to talk about the compensation and pension exam. So, with that said, let's roll. So why does this video matter? A good number of veterans that I've ever talked to, and they're in the hundreds over the years, don't exactly know what the VA needs. So this can lead to them either providing nothing or them providing them everything and evidence and materials and goods and things that don't matter and don't affect your claim. And in the long run, that just ties up the VA rater and their time. So the VA looks for very specific items when they're going to grant you or look at your disability claim for a potential granting of compensation. And claims don't fail because the veteran's lazy. They fail because the veteran doesn't know how the game works. And yes, the VA system is a game. So we're going to start to break that down in this video. So this video may be a little long, but I encourage you to stick with us because it is full of golden nuggets that you need. And then some parts we'll briefly cover because we have in the future longer videos that will specifically focus on that. But once you understand what the VA needs, the process truly becomes predictable and easy to manage and not so overwhelming and anxiety driven, because it's based on federal law. Here's what they need. I'm going to go get it and I'm going to provide it. But until you understand what they need, what they're looking for, and how this whole game of the VA claim system works, which this video is going to cover, it leads to bullet point number one. You don't know what the VA needs, so you don't do anything, or you give them everything and it doesn't matter. So just remember, the VA is not your doctor or your advocate in the claims process. So we've talked about in a previous video how the VA works is there's really two umbrellas. You have the Veterans Benefits Administration, or the VBA. They deal with your disability claim, your benefits pay. If you're 100% CHAMP VA, Chapter 35, they deal with your Montgomery GI Bill, they deal with your post 9/11 bill. So that is the Veterans Benefits Administration. The Veterans Health Administration, or the VHA, is your doctor, right? Or your primary care provider or specialty provider if you use the VA for your health care. So when it comes to your claim goes to the VBA. So when I say they're not your doctor, we're not talking about the healthcare side. We're talking about the benefits administration. So the VA makes claim decisions based really on three things: federal law, regulations that they're required to follow, and then most importantly, evidence. And the evidence, as we get into, we'll talk about, there's two ways you can do it. You can allow the VA to get it, or you can go get the evidence and provide it yourself. But that is what they are looking at when they make a claim, as federal law and regulations and evidence. What do those two, when they meet, what does that criteria look like to be able to get you a disability rating? And what the VA doesn't do is they don't assume anything. They don't assume because you told them that you hurt your back while you were in, that you hurt your back while you're in, so they're just going to give you a rating. They don't assume that, just because you said, well, I have depression and anxiety, that they're going to take your word and say, oh, okay, cool. Like, how bad is it? Oh, you're at 70%? Here you go. So there is no assumption. So understand that. Your assumption is that they don't have any information and you got to provide it to them. The next thing is they don't guess at anything. They're not going to sit there and say, well, I think that Ryan I think Ryan has a bad back. They aren't. So they're not going to assume, they're not going to guess, and they certainly aren't going to fill the gaps in. They aren't going to say, well, Ryan says he's got a bad back, he's making a claim. We're going to go get the information for it so we can tie it in and give him an actual rating. They're not. That's just not how the system works. It is your responsibility as the veteran making the claim to provide the information and the evidence that the rater needs to make a decision so that you can take those three things that he doesn't do and sit on those and go, oh, well, I just assumed that they were going to go get the information for them. I don't know why they didn't put the pieces together to give me an accurate claim. The claim system doesn't work that way. So if you think about it in the fact that it is your responsibility to make a solid VA claim, you're going to be well on your way. So the big three, the VA must have these three things to grant a VA disability or a service connection. One, you must have a current diagnosed condition. Two, current symptoms of that diagnosed condition. And then three, a nexus or a tie-in to a military service event, injury, illness, or in regards to the PAC Act, the Toxic Exposure Act, or the Burn Pit Act, is a deployment to specific areas. And the PAC Act also covers our Vietnam veterans. If you're in the country of Vietnam or Guam or other places, there are presumptive conditions that is a whole different ball game than what I'm talking about. And we'll do a video later on about presumptive conditions. But just know, if you miss just one of these, you will get denied, right? The VA must have the big three: current diagnosis, current symptoms, and a nexus before they can legally grant you a service-connected disability and then a compensation amount on top of that. Whether that is a service-connected is 0% disability, which means the VA recognizes that your condition is service-connected, but it doesn't meet a monetary value, or service-connected all the way up to 100%. So first thing they need, current diagnosis. You must have a recognized medical diagnosis. Symptoms alone aren't enough. Well, I have back pain all the time. Okay, what is causing the back pain? Is it a residual lower lumbar strain? Is it a introverted disc disease or degenerative disc disease? Do you have a bulging disc? What is the cause of the back pain? The symptoms are nothing more than showing that there's a root cause to something. But if you just go in and make a claim for chronic back pain, your chances of getting approved are very slim, and if you do, they're going to be very low. So the VA wants a medical diagnosis, and the diagnosis can come from your military medical provider when you're in, your service records, your VA provider, or a private provider. When I got for my first and second claim, when I got denied because I assumed that the VA was going to go get all my records and they didn't, I opted to build my own claim based on civilian providers alone. A therapist, a pain doc, primary care provider, physical therapy, all of that I paid for because luckily I had insurance, but I didn't go see the VA because, one, I didn't like the provider I had, and I lived in the Los Angeles region at the time, and I wasn't driving an hour and a half to see a doctor. So I opted to build pretty much my entire claim, like 99.9% of my claim, minus my annual physicals to stay in the VA system, were all private providers. So you don't have to have a VA provider to make a claim. And a diagnosis must exist at the time of your claim. So if you hurt your back in 1989 and in 2026, you want to make a claim for that back injury because you fell out of the back of a 5-ton and you jacked your back up, but you don't have current symptoms. You don't have current diagnosis. The VA is not going to, one, backdate you to 1989, or two, look at that and go, oh man, well, it is in your service records. You did hurt yourself, so we're going to go ahead and give you a VA rating. It doesn't work that way. You must have a current diagnosis. Now, falling out of that truck in 1989, has that caused a current diagnosis that a medical provider could tie to it in a Nexus, which we'll cover coming up? It is a good possibility. But without the Nexus from that event to your diagnosis, the VA is going to deny it. And old records help because it shows a history, but current diagnosis matters. And I'll give you an example. When I claimed migraines, my first claim for migraines was in my military medical record in 1999 because of my neck. I didn't actually claim it until 2018. So going back to 1999 and literally all of those years of claims, of conditions, of complaints, of medications, of treatments, those were all good. But what the VA really needed is, what do you look like now? So that just helps solidify that this condition wasn't new. But if I hadn't been seen for 15 years and I go in to claim migraines, the VA is going to look at that, and the first thing they're going to assume is you don't have them anymore. So it's important to have a current diagnosis. It's also important to have current symptoms, because the condition must be actively present or actively impacting your life. We go back to falling out of that truck. You fell out of that truck in 1989, but if you don't have any issues now, there is no current symptoms. It's not affecting your life, right? So you gotta have current symptoms. Again, old medical records, they're good for supporting the history of your condition. For you to be able to go into your doctor and say, hey, I fell out of this truck in 1989 and I've been having these issues ever since. But if you're like most veterans, one, you probably have a really thin medical record. And two, you probably don't go to the VA and complain a whole lot, or you go there and you can't put your shoes on, but you tell the doctor you're good, right? That mentality and that ego and that pride is going to cost you in your VA disability claim. So you need to go in there and start to be honest with your medical provider on issues that you have. But you can use that history of an incident or an illness to be able to present to your provider, hey, I've had this. Here's my history. Here are my current symptoms. Are these two tied together? But don't use your old medical records and say, hey, well, I was sick in 2003. But I haven't been sick since, but here's my stuff. I want to make the claim. The VA is just going to deny it because you don't have current symptoms. And the VA rates on a current level of disability, current, keyword, not the past. So they look at symptoms that exist around the time of your claim, your ongoing treatments, your documented complaints, and fairly recent imaging and tests if needed. So when we go back to that second bullet, ongoing treatments and documented complaints. Look, if you want to make a VA claim and you have a back injury and your back is still bothering you, but you've done nothing but complain about it, now is a great time to go to your doctor to say, hey, this isn't getting any better. Right? Can I get an x-ray? Can I get an MRI to see what is causing this chronic back pain? Can I go to physical therapy, or can I get a consult for the chiropractor or massage therapy? Whatever that is, you've got to get back in, A, to get that current diagnosis to figure out what is wrong with it, and then B, to be able to build the claim around nothing more than you going in and complaining about back pain. So if you start treatment, that will significantly build your claim and those current symptoms and the diagnosis. And then within that treatment, you start to look at, goes back to the research part. What are the current symptoms, frequency, and severity that the VA is looking for? And I need to highlight those, if you have them, to your doctor. One, so they can work a treatment plan to fix the problem. But two, they start to get annotated into your medical notes. And they look at what your functional impact is on your work, your daily activities, your sleep, your mobility, the economic impact of being able to work or not work or have to miss work. All of those play a role when the VA starts to help overall in making a decision on on your current rating. So what are some current symptoms? Some good acceptable evidence of current symptoms are your recent medical visits, whether it's the VA, whether it's private, emergency room, urgent care. Again, it doesn't have to be straight VA medical information. Progress notes showing your ongoing complaints. Again, this is why it's important if you're going to go to the chiropractor or physical therapy or whatever specialist you're going to go to, that you continue to document the symptoms that you have. If you're going to your mental health provider, continue to talk about the symptoms, severity, and frequency of your mental health problems that you have. Right? Because if not, the VA can say, okay, well, yeah, Ryan has a diagnosis of depression and anxiety, but there's no symptoms for me to rate that on. So your provider says you have it, and they say that it dates back into it. Cool, congratulations. Service connected, 10%. Service connected, 0%. Because they can't just go, oh, we have it. I'm going to assume that it is bad, so I'm going to give you 50%, or I'm going to give you 70%. They don't. There's that assumption piece. What conditions or what complaints do I have? And it's important when we do the research, we talk about the RGO method, research, gather, organize. When I do the research method, I want to look at the Code of Federal Regulations so I can look up any symptoms that I have that I need to make sure that I highlight. Because it's great to highlight a bunch of symptoms that you have. But the problem is, if it's not the ones that the VA are looking for, it's going to be difficult for them to give you an accurate rating. Your medication list, right? Are you taking meds for your condition? And most importantly, not only that, do you have side effects from those medications that you're required to take? Physical therapy, specialty referrals, chiropractor, massage therapy, speech pathology, like any specialized referrals that you have for your condition. Lay evidence, right? So lay statements describing present day impact. So lay evidence the VA can opt to assume. That lay evidence is a personal statement about your life and your condition and how it affects you personally and professionally. And then buddy statements. And we'll do a whole video on buddy statements and how to have a good buddy statement written. But a buddy statement, if it is accurate and the VA can deem that as credible, right? They can choose to accept that, to be able to look at that to say, hey, this guy was with Ryan before he hurt his neck and then after he hurt his neck. And, you know, one of the key things we'll talk about in that video is helping the buddy that is writing the statement to capture the symptoms that you have. Because if they write a poor buddy statement, that's cool. They wrote one for you. But it's not going to hold any weight when it comes to your claim. And that's what you want when you have buddy statements written. And then the compensation and pension exam filings that align with the record. Again, that rater is going to look at the evidence that you have. They're going to look at the compensation and pension exam. So when we do a compensation and pension exam, and part of what we cover in my book and the free downloads that I'm going to have at the end is to be consistent in your complaints and your conditions. Because if you go in to your compensation and pension exam, and the whole time you've been telling your doctors and your providers, you're good, it doesn't hurt that bad. And I get my compensation and pension exam, and all of a sudden I can't bend over 2 inches. My life is so terrible. The VA is going to look at that. Trust me, they are going to look at the evidence, they're going to look at your exam, and they're going to deem you not credible. So they're probably going to not service connect you because they're going to believe that you're trying to fraud the system. You do not want to get flagged as a frauder, right? You don't want to live your life making money off the government and then every month that it comes in, just knowing that you're a fraud. So go in there and tell the truth, but understand through the research part what you really need to highlight as far as the symptoms, frequency, severity, and impact on your life. Highlight the crap out of those things so that your medical records and your compensation and pension, they match. That way the rater can look at that and go, cool, right? This is a credible claim. Let me figure out what's wrong with them and give him a rating by federal law. But what doesn't prove to be current symptoms? I was diagnosed 10 years ago. Okay, great. That was 10 years ago. Where are you today? You can be diagnosed with something and certainly, get better. I've got 4 bulging discs in my neck. If you went out and took all of those, or took 1 or 2, the main ones, and now all of a sudden I don't have any pain, I don't have any issues, I have full mobility in my neck, I can live my life without issues, that issue was fixed. That's why when you look at disability claims, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it, but if I go in for a service-connected disability, and let's say I was at 30% and I had a bumped shoulder, and I go in to have surgery to fix the shoulder, because it's a service-connected disability, during that recovery time, the VA is going to pay me at 100%. And then at the end of that recovery period, whatever they deem it, let's just say 3 months. I don't know exactly what it is. Each one's probably a little different depending on the severity. But at the end of the 3 months, the VA is going to go back and they're going to look at that. And they may take me back to 30%. They may drop me back down to 20 or 10% because my shoulder is much better. So a current diagnosis way back in the day isn't really going to do you any good. Old imaging with no follow-up, conditions that resolve with no residuals. Again, you had you hurt your knee, back in 1996, but you have no issues with it now. You can't go back and say, well, here's where I hurt it. Can I get rated on something that has now fixed itself and I don't have any residual symptoms from it? And then silencing your medical record for long periods of time without explanation. I talk to a lot of veterans that don't go to the doctor but once a year. And then they go to the doctor and they will load the doctor up with a ton of things to either look at or get updated. And so there's, when the VA looks at that and they say, well, you're saying that you hurt yourself 3 years ago, but you really been to the doctor 3 times over that time. Like, how serious is it? So as long as you're able to explain that, especially with things like mental health, right? With depression and anxiety, post-traumatic stress, it is easy to stop things. It's easy to start things. It's even easier to stop things. And then it's hard to get going. So you've got to be able to explain those gaps in time with a logical reason that makes sense. And then the nexus. This is where claims come to live and die. The nexus is a tie-in to a in-service event, injury, illness, or deployment with one simple question. Is this condition at least as likely as not to be caused by military service? Right? That is the one thing they are looking for in the nexus, in that tie-in. And we'll cover the language here in a bit. But your nexus must come from a medical opinion. Right? A strong nexus letter will include review of your pertinent medical records, whether that's your military medical records, your private provider records, VA records. You give them all the records so that they can review that. And then they look at this in a clear and logical medical reasoning. I believe it is at least likely as not, which is I'm 50% certain that this neck condition is the direct, is a result of, this injury in 1999, or that this radiating pain is tied to this neck injury. And then they give their medical reasoning on why they believe that condition that you're claiming is tied to your military service, or if you're doing a secondary condition, like I just mentioned, radiating pain down my arm. I have it in both arms. So my claim is a secondary condition to my neck. So the nexus from the doctor is pretty easy. Yep, you've got all these bulging discs that are cutting off nerve roots, right? There was evidence of it. There's still MRIs that show this. So therefore, that radiating pain is more likely than not related to the 3 bulging discs you have in your neck that is hitting nerve endings. And then VA acceptable language. And so when we talk about VA acceptable language, it is important that you get in your Nexus letter from your medical professional or specialist, right? A couple of things, right? It is, you're not asking a doctor to pin it 100% on a condition which locks them in, because if they feel like they have to be locked into it, some of them won't write you a Nexus letter. So when I get to the very last slide, I encourage you to go sign up for our free downloads, because the last download that you get is a Nexus letter package that you provide to your provider that explains what the Nexus is, what you are looking for from that provider to do it. And then it's got 2 different examples of what a Nexus letter looks like and how they can word it. So it's very important because you want to ensure that the language is in there. So if they are certain, they are 100% certain that your service-connected disability that you are claiming or your diagnosed condition is 100% due to military service, you want them to put, I believe, my medical opinion that, his neck is directly related to this incident that occurred in, June of 1999. Because you've given him all the pertinent evidence so he can look at that. So that's the highest level you can get. The next one is more likely than not, which is greater than 50% probability. I believe that his back pain is more likely than not connected to this training incident that occurred in 1999, actually 2000. So that is them saying, I am 51% to 99% certain that your condition was caused by military service. The key one you must have at the very minimum is at least as likely as not, which they're saying, I am 50% certain or probable that your condition is tied to your military service, right? At least as likely as not puts you in the ball game at a minimum. It makes the VA recognize, okay, you are at least 50%. We'll look at the evidence. If they come up with possible or possibly or could be, or it may be tied to service, or it might be related, don't even submit the letter, because it's going to get you denied. Because the VA is going to look at that and go, well, if a medical professional is telling me that maybe it is, then maybe it isn't. So you want to get the provider to put at a minimum, at least as likely as not, so that the evidence and the appeal or in the claims process now weighs in your direction. So an in-service event, injury, illness, or exposure, right? This can happen during service or as a result of service. I talked to a lot of veterans that never go to medical. They didn't. I never did. I didn't go until I had a lieutenant force me to go down to look at my neck, because I couldn't eat, I couldn't sleep, and I had migraines all day, every day. But when you look at, especially secondary conditions, for me, like depression and anxiety is known to cause, or long-term chronic pain is known to cause depression and anxiety. So while I never went for mental health treatment while I was in, hell, I didn't go to mental health treatment until like 17 years later, right? I was able to tie that into my long-term residual chronic pain. So as long as you can tie an event or an injury or an illness or exposure or something that makes logical sense as a result of your service, then you can look at that being your nexus, right? If you weigh 125 pounds soaking wet, but you often did, ruck marches or humps with 75, 80 pounds on your back, an uneven terrain, for 10 miles, once or twice a month, there is a good chance that a back injury, that knee injuries, that feet injuries could be a result of that claim. But you've got to build it around it. You can't just say, well, I went and I humped 75 pounds for 10 miles twice a month, and that's why I'm hurt. You've got to start to put the package together to build a picture for the rater. But these can include injuries, repeated physical stress, environmental or toxic exposure, not just the PAC Act, right? If you're exposed to asbestos, if you're exposed to lead, diesel, various fumes, right? Those could be within the toxic exposure portion of the claim. And then again, documented complaints, right? So anything in your medical record, or you can tie to it, your continued documented complaints. But the key is when I start complaining about things, I want to get the provider to point in his notes that this began in my military service, right? Ran a lot, PT'd a lot, did a lot of pull-ups, did a lot of rucks, was a Marine Corps close combat instructor, Marine Corps martial arts instructor, was slammed to the ground repeatedly for 2.5 years, right? Those all start to point. So as things come, again, I start to work that as my nexus to military service. And this can come from your service treatment records, military medical records, personal records, as far as your private records, or again, we talk lay evidence. So buddy statements. You may talk about, being in an IED type event, but it's nowhere in your medical records, right? So when you make the claim and you say, hey, my vehicle was struck by an IED, I got my bell rung, and now I have a traumatic brain injury and I have these cognitive function disorders, but there's nothing in your medical records, you can have buddies that you were with write a statement that says, yes, on July 17th in Fallujah, Iraq, our vehicle struck an IED. And so they can build that so that it goes back, because when you make that claim, the VA on the backside will go into your service records and they'll look and go, yep, you were there from June to November of whatever year. So they'll see that you're there. And if you have buddy statements that build the story of what happened, right, is that you can use those. But it doesn't have to be perfectly documented. Again, it has to be credible. If you lose credibility, whether it's in a compensation and pension or through the rater, they will deny your claim because they will believe it's fraud. So the VA burden of proof. So the VA uses a benefit of the doubt standard, which is good for you, right? But again, we talk about the magical phrase, at least as likely as not. Anything under that, the VA won't approve. That tells them at a 50%, and you have the evidence to show that claim starts to lean into your favor, right? But this ain't criminal court, right? You don't need 100% certainty to make a claim, right? As least as likely as not is 50%, which puts you into the ball game of being that claim favor being on your side. But I want you to think about this as a bridge, right? On one side of the bridge is your current condition, right? On the other side of the bridge is your military medical records or your experience or your conditions or your issues. And that bridge itself is the nexus letter between what happened and where you are today. And the nexus ties those two together for that rater to walk across the bridge and make a decision. So, how does the rater actually decide a claim? This is great because raters review submitted evidence. That is what they're looking for. You want to know how they rate a decision? They rate a decision based on the evidence that you provide them. They compare it to the VA regulations and the federal law, the Code of Federal Regulations on exactly how they are supposed to rate by symptoms, by frequency, impact. If you're dealing with a neck, a back, shoulder, ankles, they're looking at your flexion, front, back, side to side. So there are requirements that they look at, right, or have to look at. They take your evidence and they look for gaps or contradictions in there. Again, when we talk about being a credible veteran or a credible claim, right, they're going to look for contradictions in your claim. Whether you're saying this happened at a certain point and you were never there, or your medical evidence doesn't match what you're telling the compensation and pension examiner. So it is key when they look for that, because they're going to look, because when they rate you, right, their boss is going to look at it. And what they don't want as a rater is to give you a rating that comes back as fraudulent later, or that they overrated you. They want to give you the most accurate rating as possible. So your job is to give them the clearest picture in the most organized manner so that they can do that. And they're going to ask, is this condition real? Did something happen in service? Again, it's got to be, your service-connected disability has to be related to your military service. Not every injury that you get is service-connected. Not every injury or condition that you get is a secondary condition to something that you have a disability rating for. And then they're going to look at, is there a medical link? And that medical link comes from the Nexus, which ties that bridge together between this current diagnosis, these current symptoms, and then your military service, whether it was an event, an injury, an illness, or a location that you were deployed to. This is why it is important when we do the RGO method, research, gather, organize. When we get to the organized method, it is this part is so important to your claim, is that you present a clean and well-organized claim, your evidence. You're going to highlight date, doctor, 1 or 2 symptoms, right? We're putting them all in a pile. So if you're making 5 claims, guess what? You have 5 piles of evidence, each pile for each condition. So when that rater pulls it out of the portal and they look, I'm only looking at this back claim that you have, right? With back related medical evidence. And then it's in its chronological order. And I'll highlight date, doctor, whatever that back diagnosis is or that back condition, and then the current symptoms. And I'm going to put them from either very newest to the oldest, or I'm going to put it from the very oldest to the very newest. But either way, that information is organized so that rater can come in and look. And he's not scrolling through. You don't, go to My Healthy Vet and you download everything and then you just submit it. And now he's got to go through 200 pieces of medical evidence that ain't even medical evidence. It's just 200 pieces of documents about things that your immunizations, who cares? Your blood pressure, who cares unless you're doing a hypertension exam. Like, a lot of those things do not matter. So don't waste the rater's time where they get frustrated with you. Give them exactly what they need in an organized manner, and they will be extremely grateful. And again, this is why it's important to do a fully developed claim, or an FDC, right? A fully developed claim is you telling the VA, once you make your claim, they will send you some paperwork and say, hey, do you want to get the information or do you want us to go get the information? I always recommend 100% of the time you go get the information, even if it is the VA documentation. Because if I have 4 different doctors that I've seen and and the VA goes out and you say, hey, go get this information for me. And the VA goes and gets it. Guess what? That doctor's office is probably going to send over that entire file. And you don't know what's in it. You don't know if it's missing information. You don't know if the information is technically not correct. Maybe the notes are wrong. And so now all of a sudden the VA is making a claim again on 300 pieces of paper, when they really only need the 20 pieces of paper that is specific for your claim. So go get the information, because it allows you to target exact information that you need. So you can highlight date, doctor, condition, 1 or 2 symptoms, and then you can put it in a nice logical order. And that right there, in that O in the organization part, will significantly increase your chances for a rating that is accurate to what your disability claim is. So one of the things I often hear, well, the VA has my records already. Like, why do I want to go get them? The VA can just look in the system. Cool. I'll go back to my second claim I talked about earlier. I didn't give the VA the records. I actually had, because originally I started in the San Diego system and then I moved to the LA region, right? So when I moved regions, and this was the time when claims were regional, I released my documents from the VA to the VA, and I had made the assumption that the VA was going to go look at my stuff. 11 months later, the VA told me that I went to the doctor twice complaining of neck and back pain. When I was in San Diego, I had 12 sets of neck injections. I lost full feeling in my foot, which 3/4 of it came back. I still can't feel 1/4 of it. I had done physical therapy. Like, I had all kinds of stuff. But they told me I went to the doctor twice because somewhere along the lines, the VA didn't give the VA the documents. The VA gave the LA system the documents, but some rater up there didn't do it. So after that, and I'm going to link the video, I want you to go watch. After that, I adopted the mentality, I will not allow the VA to tell me no ever again. Ever. Right? And from there, that's where the RGO method was really born without me even naming it until like a few days ago. And I go, oh, that makes sense. I researched what my claims were, what my current conditions were. I researched, everything that, hey, here's what happened to me. And then without even knowing the claims process, I went out and I built a claim myself by civilian providers. And then I just organized it in a manner that I thought would make sense because I put myself in the rater's shoes and said, hey, if I got a claim, would I rather just get a claim that was 100 pieces of paper that were just sporadically, made no logical sense, and would I give this guy a good claim, or a good rating? My answer to myself was, hell no, I wouldn't do that. I would look once, I would find it, and I would probably just give you 10%. Right? Because you gave me a bunch of stuff that didn't make sense. So I knew that going in. One thing I knew was organization. So I highlighted date, doctor, symptoms, and then one or two of the symptoms. And then I put that in chronological order. So as they looked at it, as they scanned it, it was all in one pile. So I would make claims of 6 or 7 things at the same time. But there would be 6 separate sets of medical evidence. So when they looked at it, they could pull the Code of Federal Regulation out and they knew, I'm only looking at your back. I'm only looking at your neck. I'm only looking at the pain in your legs. I'm only looking at the migraines. I'm only looking at the mental health. They're not trying to bounce back and forth between Code of Federal Regulations and that's current evidence. I think I saw that before. Take that away. Give them an organized claim that they can say, holy shit, finally, somebody gave me a claim that I can use and that makes sense. It tells their story and I can give them a quick and accurate claim and be on my way. Be that person, right? Don't allow the VA to go get things. Provide the fully developed claim yourself, and your claims, one, will go a lot faster. Because if the VA has to go find it, they're going to send it out. There is, you don't have one guy that's just going to continue to look and go, oh, did I get, Ryan's reports from Dr. Thomas yet? Nope, I should probably follow up. They're not going to do it, right? That is your job, to go get the medical evidence that you need for your claim. And then the last part of this, kind of as we go through, is the compensation and pension exam, right? These are huge in your claim. But understanding what they are is what they are not. A compensation and pension exam or C&P exam is not a treatment. They don't go there and look at what is wrong with you. Let me put a referral in for you. Hey, I think this medication will work, because you're going to see a doctor, nurse practitioner, physician's assistant. You're going to see a psychiatrist if you're doing mental health claims. They're going to send you to a specialist if you're doing like a dermatology claim or something that a general practitioner or a doctor may not be good at. And so they aren't. So don't look at them as you're going to them for treatment. And all they are is an evidence gathering tool. They are sent something from the VA that says, examine the veteran for, whatever you put in the official claim is, right? Cervical degenerative disc disease, right? That's all they know. Okay. they're going to grab the Disability Benefits Questionnaire, or DBQ, which when we go back to the research part, you can find the DBQ online. It's easy. All I have to do is put cervical neck DBQ, right? Or VA PTSD claim DBQ, VA disability or VA diabetes claim DBQ. Is usually the first thing that pops up because there ain't a whole lot about it. But you click on that, and within the DBQ, you can see the exact form that the examiner has to fill out to provide to the VA on your claim. So you can look at the questions before they're going to ask you the questions so that you can base your answers. Again, if we're talking about things like, that's outside of numbers, like a sleep apnea test, a hearing test, a diabetes test. But if you're looking at knee pain, ankle pain, mental health, you name it, you can look at severity, frequency, and impact. So when they get to that question, I'm not surprised, and I'm not going, I'm not really sure. I look at the questions, and then, so on my last 2 claims, this is where I learned about it, and I was like, holy shit, I wish somebody would have told me that, my first 3 claims, because while I brought the evidence, and this is where it's smart, I always took a copy of my evidence, and I gave it to the examiner. So I would make 3 copies, one for myself, one for the VA, one for my compensation and pension examiner. And it was all logically, they all looked the exact same, but I could go in and I knew when the examiner was going to ask me about symptoms or when did this occur, I could pull out that piece of evidence and show them, hey, here's my first complaint. This is my military medical record. And you give it to them. And it allows them, one, if they will touch it. Some will tell you, well, we're not allowed to touch it. They're full of crap. But I give it to them. I've had ones that will actually just type in, because everything is highlighted, the date that it happened, the doctor that diagnosed it, and those 1 or 2 symptoms that it occurred. So it dramatically sped up. But I was able to go through the exam and just continue to show evidence and not just go, oh, it's in here somewhere, or I don't know, or how many migraines do you get a month? I don't know, a couple is 0 to 1, right? But I had 4 months of migraine trackers that I was able to hand them. And on the bottom of the migraine trackers is I would average out how many prostrating migraines, which prostrating is laying down in a dark, quiet environment, is I could write down how many of those I had a month so that they could see how many mild to moderate headaches that I had a month. So it was easy for me to provide that to them, and I didn't guess. It was accurate. Oh, this month it was 5. This month it was 6. This month it was 4. So they were able to go in and see, and that's part of that lay evidence. My trackers are lay evidence, so the VA can go in and take a look. So examiners, don't decide your rating. However, they can and will provide their Nexus opinion. So it is important for you to understand the questions that they're going to ask you. And then go through and ensure you look at the Code of Federal Regulations on exactly how the VA is going to rate you. And you highlight the symptoms in every question that comes up when it deals with symptoms. And then you highlight them with symptoms, severity, and frequency. So it's important when I tie those together, and it all ties to a military in-service event, illness, injury, or condition, or if you're doing a secondary claim, your symptoms tied to what you're already service connected for. So it's important. Don't get surprised when you go in the compensation and pension exam, because a lot of your disability claim weight comes out of that C&P exam. As much as it pisses me off, and every VSO that I've ever met, and almost every veteran I've ever met, is that you can go see the same doctor for 4 years. And you can have a Nexus letter from them, and you can have the medical evidence, and you can have a claim that makes logical sense. And then you can have a C&P examiner say, I don't think that that's service connected, or that is not likely to be service connected. And the VA can opt to overrule, even if you're at the 50% mark, the VA can weigh in and say, okay, Yep, that makes sense. And then not service connected. So this is the important part. To not stress about this is to get a veteran service officer or VSO to use the strategy, right? So when you go in there, they can look at stuff. They can pull things up. And if it just doesn't make sense, you go to the VSO and go, what's my next plan? What should we do next? So get a VSO, do your research, get a good VSO, even if you have to drive an hour out of the area and you had a local one that maybe isn't as good, and I've got to drive an hour, I'm driving an hour because my claim means more to me than just I have a VSO that made my paperwork look good, told me not to do anything, got denied, and now here we are. So seek out the good VSOs and then get on their calendar and take your evidence in, go talk to them about what's going on so they can help you strategize a solid plan, because they can go in the system and take a look. They are such an amazing tool for you to use, and they're free. So use them. Examiners, they don't grant or deny claims. You don't have to go in there and worry about them saying, oh, well, that's denied, right? All they are is they're gathering the evidence. They're going to make a decision on what they feel. And then they're simply kicking that up to the VA within, I think it's 24 hours, maybe 48, maybe less than that, maybe 36. After your exam, they have to have that up to the VA. And once that thing goes from there, after your compensation and pension exam, like at any point, your exam or your disability claim at some point in the near future is going to get pulled by a rater to make a decision. So what you say matters. It is important, right? It's important to watch what you say because they are recording into your exam notes to the VA what you say. And your records matter more, right? Because you can tell them all you want, but what can you show and prove? What does the evidence, what does your complaints, what does your imaging, your tests, your physical therapy, your psychiatry, your counselor notes, what do those all show? Because again, if you go in there and you go limping in and you're dragging a leg, and then you walk out and they see you in the window and you hop in your car with nothing wrong, they're gonna claim that as not credible. So ensure that what you say matches what your medical records show. So if you don't have that in your medical records, then you need to take the time to build those medical records so that you can make a solid claim. This is that part of the organization, the RGO, the research, the G, the gather. Gather all your medical evidence, see what it says. What is it looking like and where is it weak? Do I need to go get something, whether it's a report or, into physical therapy or the chiropractor or a mental health provider or the speech pathologist because of my traumatic brain injuries, right? Where do I need to strengthen my claims? Because I may have a bunch of complaints, but if my medical records ain't showing it, then I need to make sure that I go start asking for appointments and I start getting referrals so I can build a claim. So this is where it's important, right? Go in, and if you have service-connected disabilities, go in today and call and get your intent to file in. Call the VA's 1-800 number and get your intent to file in. From there, it'll put you on a 12-month clock. It allows you 12 months to build your claim, but it will back pay you to the date you file your intent to file. So call that in and then start to go through all your stuff and figure out where you need to improve your claim, and then just plan on, hey, my goal is to make a solid claim in 3 to 4 months, not 3 to 4 days. I want 3 to 4 months because I want to take the time to research, gather, and organize it, and then submit my claim so that I can get a solid claim. So why does the top 3 reasons why the VA will regularly deny claims, and that 30% of claims in the video I talked about before, no diagnosis, no current diagnosis, no current symptoms, no nexus. Without those 3, they're going to deny it every time. Examiner used incorrect logic. So, when you go to that compensation and pension, I had a friend I just worked with, had everything he needed to prove that he had tinnitus in a logical form with a nexus letter, with the medical evidence, and the examiner said, I don't think that's service connected. And so he got denied. So that is incorrect logic. But using a good VSO, this is why you build a good claim. You go to the VSO and you go, here's what I turned in. What's our next steps? And you go from there. Right? The veteran assumes that the VA is going to go connect the dots. They're going to go get the information. They're really going to sit down and they're going to put this thing up on a board and they're going to go, yep, Ryan's got this. They're not doing it. Not happening. And the evidence is scattered or incomplete, right? When you just provide papers in a non-logical order, there is a great chance that it is going to get either denied because they missed something, or it's going to get underrated because they don't see the full picture, because there's just way too much pieces of paper in there for them to just literally go through and read every note. So take that away and give them something that they can't deny. So what does a strong claim look like? One, your current diagnosis is clear. It shows exactly what's wrong with you. Two, the evidence that you have supports the in-service event or diagnosis, and then you have a nexus that ties everything together. Your records are organized, chronological, highlighted, date, doctor, symptom, diagnosis, one or two symptoms. If I have a medical report and I went in and talked to my doc about my neck, my back, and my migraines, and I'm claiming those three, that gets 3 copies. One for my neck gets highlighted, date, doctor, something about my back, 1 or 2 symptoms, because I want to draw them to that part. The second copy that I make for my neck, I'm going to highlight date, doctor, cervical spine. I'm going to go find 1 or 2 complaints. That way, when they open that up, they're not looking at the same thing for my back. They're looking at the same report, but they're looking at my neck only. When I go to the migraine, same thing. Date, doctor, migraines, 1 or 2 of my chief complaints. Because when they open that up, I don't want to highlight the entire document. I only want to highlight something that I pull their eyes directly to. So that is the key of the O in organized. And then nothing's left to interpretation, right? Nothing is left to interpretation. I don't allow the VA to tell me no. So I'm going to get a strong nexus letter. I'm going to put the evidence in an organized manner that is chronological, that shows them. I'm going to get buddy statements if I can. I'm going to write a solid personal statement that ties everything back to my military service. Or if I'm doing a claim for a secondary condition, everything is tied back to that claim. And my whole goal is to get the rater to say, holy shit, I finally have a claim that makes sense. Because then you're going to get a strong claim, right? Unless, let's just be realistic. Unless the evidence is, you don't rate. In our heads, we rate, we look at things, we go, oh, I'm a 70%er on this. But we're not. We want to wishful think. You've got to be realistic. And I've built all that evidence that if it gives me only a 30% claim or 20% and not a 50, that's okay, right? That is where you sit because you gave them all the evidence you needed, right? So don't set yourself up to think, oh, I'm 100% disabled because I serve. You're not. Not everyone is. Not everyone is 80 or 50 or 40. Some people are 10%. Some are at 0% with no service-connected things wrong with them, which I wish I was them. Trust me, I do. So here's big takeaways. The VA system is rigid, not evil. It's based on regulations and federal law. The regulations and the federal law that you can easily look up. So when you learn what the VA needs through the evidence that I've got to provide, the big 3, current diagnosis, current symptoms, and a nexus to military service, I look up the Code of Federal Regulations, so I see that 1, there is a claim for it, and 2, what the symptoms are that I need, or the information that the VA is going to make their diagnosis on. And then I look up the Disability Benefits Questionnaire. So I look up the questions that they're going to ask me before they ask me so I can give them the symptoms, frequency, and severity. I can make sure that I look up the symptoms, frequency, severity, and I can make sure that I'm addressing those in my medical, my doctor's appointments, my specialty appointments, whatever it is. I'm capturing those more than once than me just saying it, as I've got those in my notes. So when we start to put this all together, you're like, oh, I don't have to guess what the VA wants. The VA is telling me what they want, just no one ever showed me. And use the RGO method. Research, gather, organize. Take your time and slow down. If you prepare, that's going to beat your frustration every single time. If I prepare for my exam, it's kind of like going into a job interview. If you go into a job interview and you say, well, I'm probably not going to get this job anyway, how do you think that interview is going to go? You're not going to nail it. Let's just be honest. But if you go in there and you go, okay, I know about this company. I know about this job. I know this job. I'm going to nail this freaking interview. If you take that same mentality into your VA claim of, I know what the VA wants. I have those conditions. I have the evidence. I've built a strong claim. It is in a logical, organized manner. I'm going to get a solid rating. That is how, my friends, you get a solid rating. If not, and you just guess, or you hope, or you assume the VA is going to do the work for you, you're just going to be disappointed. So let's take the disappointment and the guesswork out, and let's start slowing down and building a solid claim. So what do I want you to do next? A, you're here. If you made it this long, please do me a favor. Subscribe to the channel, like this video, and drop a comment on the one key thing that your takeaway is from this video. What is the one thing you go, oh, I got it. I feel much better now. And then subscribe, because trust me, this channel right now, as I build this is one of our very beginning videos. By subscribing and liking the channel, it tells YouTube, hey, people actually like this, and it starts to put this video in front of the people that need to see it. So help me get to veterans. Help me help people learn the process to make a solid claim. One of those ways you can do that, it's just a simple like and subscribe and drop a comment. Hey, here's the one big takeaway, right? And that's good. That tells me that you're on the right track. Next, in the description, please sign up for our for free checklist. They are free, cost you nothing. I'm not going to spam you an email every, 6 minutes on this deal or that deal. Look, all I want you to do is one, get an initial email that you're going to understand the basics of a VA claim, right? Take this, take other information, but look at it. These are good to be able to have, to print, to put in a file, put in that 2-part file as you start to make a claim so you understand what the VA claims process looks like from a big picture. Next, you're going to get, a couple days later, the VA claims mentality. We're going to put your mentality in check. If you haven't watched the video now on setting your mindset, please go shift your mindset from the VA just wants to run me down till I quit to I'm not allowing the VA to tell me no. So please take some time and go watch that video. The next one you're going to get is the VA Disability Claims Foundation Checklist, Establishing Possible Claims. This is going to allow you to sit down and it's going to ask you a series of questions so that you can look back now and say, what happened to me? Do I have the evidence? What are my symptoms? And it's everything that you can look at to be able to say, oh, you know what? This happened to me, but I don't have any of my medical records. I've got to go find those. Or this happened to me. I'm still having issues with it, but I haven't been to the doctor in 4 years on this. I should probably do that because it's a potential claim, right? So get these, take the time to start looking at it. And most importantly, the one I just dropped the other day was our Nexus letter package. So this is a package that you can provide to your medical provider or specialist that says, hey, I'm making a VA disability claim. I could really use your assistance. Here's the package, what I'm looking for. And then in the last couple of pages, it's got some examples for you to use. And then within that, there is a copy and paste email in there that you can drop in to send to your provider if you're asking them for a claim, and then you attach that document. So everything's in there. It takes the guesswork out of what you need to understand the process, set your mental, potentially look at what claims you have, and then how to get a Nexus letter. And then our new book that just came out, How to Build a Strong VA Disability Claim the First Time on Amazon. I would ask you just take a look at it. I would ask you to maybe think about investing. If you have Amazon Unlimited, KDP Unlimited, or not KDP, Kindle Unlimited, you can go get the book for free. But I would ask you to take a look and consider getting the book. One, because it will lay out everything that you need. When you start watching videos, it's hard to retain everything. And it's hard to go back, this video and that video and this video. Pick up the book. And that way, when you look at the book, it's got everything you need to make a strong VA disability claim so that you can continue to reference it. And from there, I want you to simply slow down, continue to learn the process, call in your intent to file if you don't have one. If you have one, it's okay. Take a deep breath. You're not behind the power curve, but I want you to continue to learn, and I want you to continue to build solid claims so that you can get the rating that you deserve. Thank you, and we will talk soon.